My name is Marlene Catherine Pierce. I'm 53 years old, and I spent 30 years being the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who never asked for anything while everyone else took and took and took. I'm sharing this now because I need other women to understand something I learned too late. The people who benefit most from your silence are often the ones most afraid of your voice. What happened that October afternoon in the parking lot of Hendricks and Associates law firm changed everything I thought I knew about my family, my marriage, and the price I'd been paying for keeping the peace. This is the story of how a stranger's warning, a mother's final gift, and 30 years of buried resentment collided in a way that would reshape my entire life. The rain had started that morning, one of those cold autumn downpours that turns the leaves into slick carpets of gold and rust across suburban Connecticut driveways. My husband Brian had been oddly cheerful at breakfast, which should have been my first clue that something was wrong. After 28 years of marriage, you learn to read the subtle shifts in mood, the way someone butters their toast a little too carefully, the false brightness in their voice when they suggest running errands together. He'd asked me to come with him to Ridgefield to handle some paperwork related to my mother's estate. Mom had passed away 6 months earlier, and the grief was still raw, still catching me off guard in grocery store aisles and during evening news broadcasts she would have hated. I hadn't wanted to go. I was tired, bone tired in that way that has nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with carrying other people's expectations for so long that you forget what your own shoulders feel like unburdened. But Brian had insisted, using that particular tone that meant refusing would require more energy than complying. So I'd gotten in the car, watching the wipers struggle against the rain, and tried not to think about how my mother's house still smelled like her lavender sachets and Pond's cold cream, how we'd had to sell it to pay for the nursing home bills that had consumed her final 2 years. When we pulled into the law office parking lot, Brian turned to me with what I recognize now as practiced casualness. Actually, honey, this part is just some technical stuff about life insurance policies, really boring executor business. Why don't you wait here? I'll be 15-20 minutes tops. No point in both of us getting soaked. He gestured at the rain, which had intensified into silvery sheets against the windshield. Before I could respond, he was out of the car, hunching his shoulders against the weather, jogging toward the brick building with its colonial white trim and brass nameplate. I sat there in the passenger seat of our Honda Accord, watching water stream down the windows, feeling that familiar hollowness that had become my constant companion since Mom died. She'd been my anchor, the only person who'd never asked me to be smaller or quieter or more convenient. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Deanna. Hope you're having a better day than me. Mia needs braces now too. Never ends. I stared at the message at the casual assumption that I'd respond with sympathy, maybe even an offer to help financially. Again, always again. That's when the knocking started. Sharp, insistent, too urgent to be casual. I looked up and there she was, a woman maybe 40, dark hair plastered to her face by rain, wearing a burgundy suit jacket over jeans in a way that suggested she'd dressed in a hurry. Her eyes were wide, and there was something in her expression that made my heart start hammering before I even rolled down the window. "Are you Marlene Pierce?" she asked, rain dripping off her chin. When I nodded, stunned, she continued in a rush. "I'm Jennifer Costa. I'm a paralegal at Hendricks and Associates. I'm breaking about 6 different professional rules right now, but I can't." She glanced back at the building, then leaned closer. "Your husband is inside with his attorney and your sister. They're signing papers to claim your mother's life insurance policy and her investment accounts. There's a codicil to her will that names you as sole beneficiary of everything except the house, which was already sold. But they're using a power of attorney document that your husband says you signed 3 years ago when your mom first got sick. Did you sign anything like that?" The world tilted. I grabbed the door handle, my hand shaking. "What? No, I never signed anything giving Brian power of attorney over my mother's estate. Why would I?" Jennifer's face tightened with something like relief and fury mixed together. "Because that's what I thought. Look, I've been doing this job for 12 years, and I've seen this exact scenario 4 times. Family members forge signatures, claim the responsible child gave them authority, drain estates while that child is kept in the dark or deliberately confused by fake paperwork and partial information." She pulled a plastic folder from under her jacket, protecting it from the rain. "Your mother's attorney, Mr. Hendricks, he's old school, semi-retired. He wasn't involved in setting up this meeting. Your husband called our junior partner directly, someone who doesn't know your family. But I pulled your mother's original file this morning when I was organizing documents and I saw her notes. Marlene, your mother left you everything. She wrote in the margins of her will, Marlene sacrificed her college fund for her sister. Marlene paid for her father's funeral. Marlene deserves this. Does that sound like your mother? I couldn't breathe. The rain sounded too loud, like being underwater. College fund. I hadn't thought about that in decades, about being 19 and accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship, about needing just $12,000 from the college fund my grandparents had set up for me. About my parents sitting me down at our kitchen table, my mother wringing her hands while my father explained that Deanna had gotten pregnant, that she needed help, that family came first. They'd used my college fund for Deanna's apartment deposit, her car, her baby expenses. Just for a year or two, they'd promised. We'll pay you back. They never did. I'd gone to community college instead, worked full-time at a bank, married Brian at 23, and built a life that always felt like it belonged to someone else. She left me everything. My voice sounded strange, distant. Jennifer nodded. The life insurance policy is substantial, $430,000, plus investment accounts totaling around $200,000. Your mother was careful with money after your father died. She told Mr. Hendricks specifically that this was for you, to make up for what she called old debts and old favoritism. Those are her exact words in the file notes. She paused. Then added quietly, your husband and sister are in their right now claiming you've been too emotionally unstable since your mother's death to handle financial decisions, that you agreed Brian should manage everything to protect you from stress. It's a very convincing performance. Something inside me cracked open, something that had been sealed shut for so long I'd forgotten it was there. Rage, pure, clean, clarifying rage. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold kind that sharpens your mind and steadies your hands. I looked at Jennifer, this stranger who'd risked her job to warn me, and I made a decision that would change everything. How much time do I have before they finish signing? Maybe 5 minutes. They're waiting for the notary to witness the final documents. I grabbed my purse, my phone. Is there a back entrance to this building? Jennifer's face split into a fierce smile. Yes, and I can get you in without them seeing you. There's a conference room with a connecting door to the office where they are. You'll be able to hear everything before you decide how to handle this. She pulled out her key card. But Marlene, once you go in there, you can't unknow what you're about to learn. Are you sure? I thought about my mother's face in the nursing home, how she'd held my hand during her last lucid conversation and said, I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. I'm fixing it now. I'd thought she meant emotionally, spiritually. I hadn't known she meant legally, financially, permanently. I'm sure. The back hallway of the law office smelled like old books and furniture polish. Jennifer led me through a narrow corridor, past framed diplomas and landscape paintings, to a door marked Conference Room B. She unlocked it, ushered me inside, then pointed to another door that was slightly ajar. Through it I could hear voices. Brian's voice, Deanna's voice, and a younger man I didn't recognize, probably the junior partner Jennifer had mentioned. So the power of attorney is dated March 2022. The young attorney's voice, uncertain, checking details. That's right, Brian, smooth and confident. Marlene was overwhelmed when her mother's dementia got bad. She asked me to handle the legal and financial stuff so she could focus on caregiving. That's just the kind of person she is, all heart, not really a head for complicated paperwork. I felt Jennifer's hand on my shoulder, steadying, supportive. Deanna's voice cut in, and hearing her felt like a betrayal all over again. Ma has always been a little fragile emotionally, even when we were kids. She needs protecting from herself sometimes, you know. Mom understood that. That's why she wanted Brian to have oversight. Mom told me that herself. The lie was so casual, so complete, that for a moment I almost doubted my own memory. But then I heard the junior attorney say, and Ms. Pierce is aware of this meeting. She's consented to Mr. Pierce managing the distribution of assets. A pause too long. She's in the car, Brian finally said. She didn't want to come in too emotional, grief, you know. That's when I pushed open the connecting door and walked into the room. The tableau was almost comical. Brian half standing from his leather chair, his face cycling through shock to fear to a desperate attempt at pleasure. Deanna's mouth opening in a perfect O, her hand frozen over a document she'd been about to sign. The young attorney, barely 30, looking confused and worried. And there, spread across the conference table, neat stacks of paper that represented my mother's final act of love and restitution. Hi, honey, I said to Brian, my voice steady and cold. I'm feeling much less emotional now. In fact, I've never felt more clear-headed in my life. Brian recovered quickly, I'll give him that. 28 years of marriage had taught him how to manipulate me, how to use my desire for peace against me. Marlene, sweetheart, what are you doing here? I thought you were going to wait. You thought I would wait in the car like a good girl while you stole my inheritance. I turned to the attorney, whose nameplate read, Justin Carr, Associate. Mr. Carr, my name is Marlene Catherine Pierce, and I have never at any point given my husband power of attorney over any aspect of my mother's estate or my financial affairs. Whatever document he's shown you with my signature is a forgery. Deanna stood up, her face flushing. Ma, come on, don't be dramatic, we're just trying to help you. You know you get overwhelmed. Sit down, Deanna. Something in my voice made her comply immediately. Let's talk about overwhelmed. Let's talk about being 19 and watching my college fund disappear because you got pregnant and needed help. Let's talk about being the one who paid for Dad's funeral while you claimed you couldn't afford to contribute. Let's talk about the last 15 years of you borrowing money that you never paid back, for Mia's piano lessons, for your car repairs, for your emergency root canal. Let's talk about how I'm always the one who has to sacrifice, has to be understanding, has to keep the peace while you take and take and take. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and liberating. Deanna's face had gone white. I always paid you back, she whispered. No, you didn't, not once, not ever, and Mom knew it. That's why she left everything to me, Deanna, because she finally saw what I've known for 30 years, that you're the golden child who was never expected to struggle, and I'm the responsible one who was never allowed to want anything for myself. I turned to Brian, whose mask had finally slipped completely. He looked cornered, calculating. And you, when did you decide to steal from me? Was it before Mom died or after? Did you see the life insurance paperwork and just couldn't help yourself? That money should be for our family, he said, and there it was, the entitlement laid bare. You would have just given half of it to Deanna anyway, you always do. I was protecting our future, our retirement. No, I interrupted, you were spending it on Vanessa. The name dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Brian's face went grey. Deanna looked confused. I pulled out my phone, opened the photos I'd found 3 months ago when I'd borrowed Brian's iPad to look up a recipe, and his messages had synced automatically. Photos of him with a woman 20 years younger, texted plans for a condo in Scottsdale, Arizona, discussions about how much money he'd need to start fresh after the divorce. I've known for months, I told him quietly. I've been seeing an attorney, I've been copying financial records, I've been documenting every lie. I was going to wait until after Mom's estate was settled to file, but you couldn't even give me that, could you? You had to try to steal from me even now. Justin Carr had been frantically typing on his laptop. Mrs. Pierce, I need to inform you that these documents cannot be executed without your explicit consent and verified signature. If there's any question of forgery. There's no question, I said. I want copies of everything my husband brought you, and I want a formal statement that no transfers or distributions have occurred. My mother's attorney was Mr. Hendricks SR. I'll be contacting him directly to handle the actual estate distribution. This is insane, Brian started, but I held up my hand. The power of attorney you forged, that's a felony in Connecticut. The attempted theft of my inheritance, that's financial fraud. I could have you arrested right now. I let that sink in, watching him deflate. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something worse. I'm going to divorce you, and under Connecticut law, any attempt to defraud a spouse before divorce proceedings becomes a factor in asset distribution. That means you'll get far less than half of our marital assets. And Deanna, I turned to my sister, who was crying now, mascara streaking down her face. I'm not going to cut you off completely because despite everything, you're my sister and I love Mia. But things are going to change. No more emergency loans, no more bailing you out, no more expecting me to sacrifice my needs for your wants. I gathered my purse, nodded to Jennifer, who was standing in the doorway looking both shocked and triumphant, and walked out of that conference room with my head high. The divorce took 8 months. Brian tried to fight, but the evidence of his affair and his attempted theft made it impossible. I got the house, 65% of our retirement accounts, and the satisfaction of watching him move into a studio apartment near his new job at a car dealership. Vanessa had left him the moment his financial prospects diminished. Deanna and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, painfully, with therapy and brutal honesty. She admitted she'd been jealous of me, of my stability and responsibility, even as she'd exploited those very qualities. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. Mom's inheritance gave me something I'd never had before: choices. I went back to school at 53, finishing the degree I'd abandoned at 19. I travelled to Italy and Greece, places I'd only seen in magazines. I helped Mia with her college fund, on my terms, with clear boundaries and expectations. And I started volunteering at a women's legal aid clinic, helping other women recognize financial manipulation and emotional abuse before it consumed decades of their lives. On the 1-year anniversary of that rainy October afternoon, I took Jennifer Costa out for dinner at an expensive restaurant overlooking the Sound. We'd become friends, the way people do when they've witnessed each other's worst and best moments. Over wine and lobster risotto, she asked me if I regretted how everything had unfolded. I thought about Brian's face when he realized I knew about Vanessa, about Deanna's tears when I'd finally spoken my truth, about the life I might have continued living if that stranger hadn't knocked on my car window and spoken 6 words that changed everything. "You're in danger. Trust me." "No," I told Jennifer. "I don't regret it. I regret the 30 years I spent waiting in the car, metaphorically speaking, waiting for permission to want things, waiting for other people to consider my needs, waiting for my life to start after everyone else had taken what they needed from me." I raised my glass. Here's to women who knock on windows. Here's to mothers who make amends. And here's to refusing to wait in the car ever again. We clinked glasses as the sun set over the water, turning everything gold and possible, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like the author of my own story instead of a supporting character in everyone else's. That's the thing about betrayal I've learned. Sometimes it's not the end of your story. Sometimes it's just the beginning of the one you should have been writing all along.